Good morning, everybody. I can see there's still one or two attendees joining the session. We're sitting at about 112 and going up steadily. But I'm just going to go about and get things started. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules to join me for the session today. I'm joining you guys from a very cold Johannesburg, and I hope that wherever you guys are, that you are keeping warm and keeping safe, especially in these difficult times that we find ourselves in. I'm just going to go about and then move on to the next slide. Before we begin, I've got a couple of things that I'd just like to go over. The session is being recorded, and it will be shared with all participants. It will also be made available on our GreatSoft YouTube channel, which then you guys could refer back to at a later stage, or perhaps even share with your colleagues. There is also a Q&A panel or section available for you guys to make use of. Please do post any and all questions there. My fellow colleague, Ian, is helping me today, and he'll be answering your guys' questions. He's also going to try and do that to the best of his ability. And then should he not be able to answer any questions or feel that it's a question that I can answer towards the end of the webinar, then he'll leave it unanswered and I'll address it at the end. You guys will see we also have a couple of polls right at the beginning of the webinar, and I'd like you guys to get your smartphones ready because I'm going to ask you to try and participate in those polls with us. And then towards the end of the webinar, when you do exit the webinar, we got another survey. Please do try and participate in these polls and surveys, because the information and insight gained from those polls and surveys are invaluable to us as a product development team, and it ultimately will help us improve the product. So for those of you who don't know who I am or I haven't had the pleasure to meet you, I see there's one or two familiar names in the attendee list. Hello to all of you, and for those of you who are wondering where's Anita, unfortunately Anita has since moved on from GreatSoft and is no longer working with us, and I've stepped into the secretarial product management role and will be managing the product moving forward. Okay, so there's a little picture of me for those of you wondering what I look like. I've since shaded the beard and it's no longer there. I joined the GreatSoft team in September 2018. So September this year will mark 3 years that I've been with GreatSoft. But before joining the GreatSoft team, I had the privilege and pleasure of working in the audit environment myself. I did work for an audit firm in Benoni, where I had numerous exposure to audit, accounting, tax, and secretarial engagements. I then moved on and joined the GreatSoft team, and since joining the GreatSoft team, for those of you whose project I've worked on, I was an on-site consultant. So I had the pleasure of working with small, medium, and large firms, and then implementing best practice at those firms. Then I just got a couple of fun facts about myself for you guys to get to know me a little bit better. I'm very, very passionate about product, and more specifically marketing. It is something that I strive for, and I really get a kick out of providing a solution for clients. I'm an avid coffee drinker. I love good coffee. As everyone here in the office knows, it's what gets me through the day. And I love everything technology and tech related as well. I try to keep my pulse on that. I'm also always eager to learn something new. Sometimes I find myself deep down the YouTube rabbit hole, learning about string theory, something that I thought I'd never find myself learning about. So I do love learning, and yeah, that's enough about me. Then that brings us to our polling section. So I've prepared a couple of polls for us to try and go through today. And the first question, the first one that I have for us here is, what for you guys as a firm is the most time-consuming and or challenging services that you do offer? And please do have your smartphones at hand, because I'm going to ask you guys to go ahead and scan the QR code that's on screen now. If you do not have a smartphone and are joining via, or perhaps you have an extra screen there, you're more than welcome to then also head over to slido.com. And then you can just go ahead and enter that 6-digit number on the website, and it will take you directly to the poll. So I do urge you to please try and participate in the poll. It is a live poll, so we're going to see the results come through as and when everyone joins. And I'm going to go ahead and start the first poll. And there we have a couple of questions. As a firm, what is the most time-consuming and or challenging functions for you and your firm? I see we do have a couple of ones coming through. Creating and maintaining share registers seems to be taking the precedent there. There we go. Creating and maintaining share registers at 42%. 19% annual returns, slowly dropping, and then other. So that's quite interesting, 7%. I must have missed something quite large then. So let's see, I see there's about 40, 41. I'm just going to let it roll on a little bit longer, see if there's any extra ones coming through. So it does seem like the majority of us are struggling with creating and maintaining share registers. It looks like annual returns is making a good comeback there, 25%. Cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this poll running. So if you didn't get to answer the first question, you will still be able to answer it, and then I'll just review those responses at a later stage. Look there, we got a tie. There we go. Annual returns 33%. That's a large portion, and we got 55 people participating there. So the next one that we have is, how are we or you currently billing for these services? And if I just go back to the poll, we can go on to the next one. So there, how are you currently billing for these services? Time and material, hourly. So you got an employee, and then based off whatever they capture in their timesheets, you're going to be billing the client. Do some of you have your clients on a monthly retainer? And then also an annual retainer? Cool. So it looks like majority billing time and material. Some of you billing both hourly and retainer, because I do see where you're coming from. There's some functions that would need to be, that could be hourly. And then we also got a small portion on a monthly and annual retainer. Cool. Okay, so then let's move on to the last but not the least poll question is, as a firm or as a user or as an employee, how confident are you in your secretarial offering? And let's move on to that one. So this is a rating question. It's going to look a little bit different. And there you can rate yourself out of 5. And how confident are you? Like, do you feel you could be offering a better service? Do you feel perhaps your employees need to be upskilled a little bit? Do you feel that you're not using GreatSoft to the best ability, which could ultimately enhance your firm's service offering? So it's quite a good portion of you guys giving yourself 5-star rating. Majority leaning towards that, and then there's a few on the lower end or lower spectrum, but that's fine. That's why we're having this webinar, and that's why we're going to be having future webinars as well, so that we can level the playing field. Cool. There's about 71 participants that have participated in this one, and we got a score of about an average score of about 3.9. Thank you. So I'm going to leave that poll running, and I'm going to leave it in the back end, and you guys can at a later stage change your answers or whatever the case may be. I'll stop the poll at the very end of the webinar. So I'm going to move back to my slides, and then it brings me to today's agenda. So I'm currently busy with the introduction side of things, and we're first going to look at I think the first thing that we need to decide before we can talk about creating new and recurring revenue streams is, how do we go about differentiating ourselves from other firms? I think that's an interesting question. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit and start the discussion around it. And then once we've decided how can we go about differentiating ourselves, the next question I think for a lot of us is, how or where do we even start by doing so? And then what I'll do is I'll move towards GreatSoft itself, and then I'll actually look at how GreatSoft Secretarial, more specifically, can assist us in differentiating ourselves, and then even creating these new and recurring revenue streams while reducing our administrative burdens as a firm. Okay, so how do we differentiate ourselves from other firms? And this is a difficult question, and the reason why it's such a difficult question, especially in today's day and age, is the accounting environment is a very competitive environment, and even so, more specifically, the cloud accounting environment. So we have all of these cloud accounting firms popping up, and they making use of web applications like GreatSoft, Xero, and they are ultimately enhancing their service offering to their client base. So I think a good place where we can start to differentiate ourselves from the other firms is compliance. But more specifically on the compliance spectrum, the statutory compliance side of things. Statutory compliance has always somewhat been of a black sheep in most of our service offerings, and it is very often the very last thing on our to-do list, or perhaps even the very last thought when we think of the word compliance. When we think of the word compliance, our thoughts normally tend to lean towards our respective tax authorities. But we've seen that both SIPC for South Africa and BIPA for Namibia are less stern when it comes to enforcing statutory compliance. But I personally think, and I personally feel, and I think there's a few of you that would agree with me, something's brewing, and the winds of change are blowing. And I can see, and we can see, that SIPC more specifically is making moves towards implementing broad spectrum compliance. And we can see this with the automation of certain processes that they are now doing. They are going into automating a lot of the processes on SIPC. It's no longer as manual as it was in the past. And more specifically, in recent years of late, we've seen them introduce the XBRL, and early last year, they introduced the SIPC compliance checklist. So this does place us in an awkward situation because statutory compliance is sometimes overlooked, and neither the business owner, directors, or accounting professionals feel that it's their responsibility to go ahead and comply. But I think as auditors, accountants, and company secretaries, accounting professionals in general, we have a professional and ethical obligation to start and facilitate these awkward conversations with our existing clients, and perhaps even make it a part of our processes when onboarding new clients. And ultimately practicing good governance and making sure that they are compliant with the Companies Act. Luckily for us, we for the time being, no one is really enforcing statutory compliance. I mean, SIPC, unlike SARS, is not running around with a whip and enforcing it for the time being. But as accounting professionals, it does give us some sort of a grace period. And it does allow us to ensure our clients are statutory compliant, employees, business owners, and directors are upskilled, while at the same time enhancing our service offering as a firm, which will ultimately competitively differentiate us from other firms and create potential new revenue streams at the same time. So in summary, I think we got a good formula here, and I'm sure this formula will evolve over time. But I think first things first, and I always go back to my agile methodologies as a developer, and agile says the first thing that we need to do is we need to start. So as accounting professionals, we need to start the discussions, and we need to facilitate these awkward discussions with our current existing client base. And for the new clients, we need to implement a process and make it part of our onboarding process when we onboard these new clients. And then we need to take the journey where we need to continuously upskill ourselves, the business owners that we work with, and the directors. And if we group those together, we will have an enhanced service offering that we can provide to our clients. So how do we start, and more specifically, where do we start? I think those are good questions as well. And I think many of us have found ourselves in this situation where we have an existing client, or perhaps we've onboarded a new client, and all is good and well, but all of a sudden they have a compliance requirement from the client side of things, whether that be they need to apply for a tender, they need to open new bank accounts, they perhaps have a business opportunity where they need share certificates, or in some cases, they urgently need access to a credit facility. And then we find ourselves on the back foot, and we need to play catch up in order to ensure our clients are compliant from a statutory point of view. So there's a small change that we can make, and yes, it is time consuming, but think of it this way. If we change the way we look at this approach, and let's say for our existing client base, we perform a statutory audit or a statutory health check. We'll go through what that could look like in just a few seconds. And then the client makes this compliance requirement or compliance request. We find ourselves now in a situation where we can quite easily and quite readily provide our clients with these documents. And then the same goes for when we onboard new clients. We need to perform that statutory audit or statutory health check before we even onboard them as a client. And then ultimately, in the long run, we can meet that compliance requirement before they even ask the question. And I think as good practice or best practice, we could repeat this biannually, depending on the client size, or perhaps annually, if your clients are willing. So what does a statutory audit or health check look like? So I've, in short, combined a brief checklist or health check that we as accounting professionals can have a look at. And I personally feel it's a good place to start because it does touch on a lot of key important areas of the Companies Act. And I think it ultimately meets the bare minimum to classify us or our clients as compliant. I think a very good place to start with is the SIP-C compliance checklist. I know it was met with a lot of uproar, and it is just an extra admin process that needs to happen. But I feel if we make it part of our processes, more specifically, so when onboarding new clients, it really does become an asset to us as accounting professionals. Because let's think of the scenario when we onboard a new client. We as a firm can go ahead and take the SIP-C compliance checklist that's there in GreatSoft, perhaps even summarize or break it down and make it even more simpler. And then when we look at signing up a new client, we send them through this checklist and we just ask them those questions. Because then it places us in the situation where we can now provide advice and consult to our clients and before they even join our firm. Then the next thing that we need to look at is, and this is also a very important one, because I think a lot of us do miss it, but I think we need to make sure that whatever the registered office is on SIP-C, that registered office is indeed correct and is indeed accurate. And whatever that registered office is, or maybe whether it's your office or the client's office, that the statutory records are available at that registered office upon request. And we've recently introduced a tool within the company and CC registers, the SIP-C compare tool, which at a click of a button allows you to compare what's in my client's register compared to what's sitting at SIP-C. And right away, right there, you can quickly make an assessment and see whether or not that address is indeed correct or is accurate. The next thing that we can go about doing is we need to make sure that our registers are accurate, and more specifically, shareholders and directors from incorporation date all the way through to current date. Because a lot of the time we find ourselves in a situation where we perhaps are playing catch up, where we onboarded a client and all of those records are perhaps not there or perhaps not really readily available. So I think that's an important item on this checklist that we need to make sure of, and we need to start looking to address when we're doing these health checks on our existing clients as well. And then last but not least is the annual returns. So interesting enough, SIP-C released a statistic where I think only, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's about 33% of registered companies are actually submitting annual returns on an annual basis, which means there's a lot of entities which just aren't submitting their annual returns, or they are either in the process of deregistration. And to try and combat this as a product offering, we've recently also introduced the SIPC update utility in the annual returns for South African clients. And what that allows you to do is, at a click of a button, it allows you to see the enterprise status of that entity. Are they in deregistration? When was their last annual return submitted? And once again, it just puts us as accounting professionals in the driving seat to be able to quickly and easily make an assessment and apply that to a health check. Cool. So I think in summary, that's a starting point. And I think if we can address these areas, it will ultimately help us as a firm or as accounting professionals to enhance that service offering and just take us to the next level and differentiate us from the next firm out there. So let's go look at how can GreatSoft Secretarial assist us in this process in differentiating ourselves, as well as creating new and recurring revenue streams without being too much of an administrative burden or increasing the workload. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move over to the live demo section of the webinar. And for some of you that are, let's call it advanced or intermediate GreatSoft users, a lot of these areas that I'm going to be going through might be new, because I think they are areas that people don't really focus on a lot or tend to be forgotten. And today I'm more specifically also going to be looking at the practice management side of things, about how can we go about using template billing and global billing to create recurring bills and perhaps even reduce some administrative burden. Because I see there was a good portion of the attendees that said they do bill clients annually or monthly, or perhaps even make a use of a combination of both. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize my screen, and I'm going to move over to GreatSoft, and I'm just going to go back to our home screen, a screen that all of us are familiar with. Just giving that a few seconds to load. And then the first thing that we're going to have a look at is something that I would say creeped into the system, because even from my consulting days, a lot of users aren't aware of it. But I think it does add extra value to us as accounting professionals, and even more specifically so company secretaries. So what are these? These are client services. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to head over to CRM, and I'm going to pull up a client listing, and I'm just going to go and head over to straight to please submit my AR. It's a demo client that I loaded in preparation for the webinar. And I'm going to open up the client viewing screen. And you'll see there's something that looks a bit different to the rest of your setup and the rest of you guys, what you guys use. I think there might be one or two of you in today's session that are currently and already making use of client services. But I'd urge the rest of you to try and make use of it, not, like I said, not just from a secretarial perspective, but also from a firm-wide perspective as well. And I'm going to focus on one of the service offerings that I've implemented at one or two of my clients as well. So I'm on the client view screen, and most of you will be familiar with this screen. You'll see we have the standard GreatSoft services right here at the top. And as we all know, those are the services that will determine where a client appears, whether they appear in the secretarial side of things, the tax side of things, and if we're going to be billing this client or not. But I think it was around about 2019 or early 2020. I'm not too sure of the exact timing. We introduced user-defined services. And these are services that you as a firm can now go ahead and define. And I normally advise clients to define these services according to your engagements that you are currently, or services that you're currently offering to clients. So you can see this is our virtual classroom training site. So you can see there's the audit, independent review, monthly bookkeeping, monthly statutory safekeeping. So remember, in the poll, we had a monthly retainer and then we had an annual retainer. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've gone and added the annual statutory safekeeping service. So this is perhaps a service that we're going to be offering to clients. And the reason why we're going to be adding it there is for completeness. We want to make sure that if we are offering this annual statutory safekeeping service to the client, that we are indeed executing the work. And not only that, we are also indeed billing them for the work at the end of the day. Cool. So there's the annual, the user-defined services. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how to go about adding them. But if you do want to add them, if you have access to the maintenance section in GreatSoft, you'll find them under maintenance status types, and then you'll see their client services. If not, what you could do is you can either contact our support team, or if you're not too sure who to contact, you can email myself. I will be sharing my email address towards the end of the webinar, and then I'll try and assist you. And if not, I'll forward you on to the relevant party who can assist you in getting this up and running, because I think the value that this adds is quite a lot. And the reason why it does so is if I move over to reports, we can now see under the clients category, there's a report listing clients with services. And this report now allows us to pull a listing of clients that are flagged for a certain service. So let's say, let's get creative, and let's say it's January 2022, and we preemptively want to see all the clients that have been flagged for annual statutory safekeeping. And we want to make sure that we bill these clients, or make sure that we see that the work has indeed been executed. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to go ahead and say service flag. And then you'll see there's a flag, annual statutory safekeeping flagged. So I'm going to go ahead and flag that guy. And the rest of the filters I can just leave to default. And what I'd advise you guys to also do, because I do see a lot of people don't make use of this function, but it is really, really a nice function, is the setup export function. This function, if you do a ticket, what it does is it exports the raw data from the database as it is in the database into Excel, and it just makes it a lot easier to work with that data if you do want to do VLOOKUPs or perhaps do pivots and those kind of things. Because if you make use of this Excel export here, it exports it in this format, which is absolutely horrible to work with because you've got all those merge fields and all those kind of things. So there you can see we've now got a list here on the right of all our clients that are flagged for the annual statutory safekeeping service. And what we can now do is we can work through that list, and we can go ahead and make sure that the work was actually completed. And now what we can do, I'm being very theoretical here. You guys got to use your imagination with me. Let's say we've gone through the whole process. We've completed the work, and now the last step is to bill this client, which is ultimately sometimes the most resource intensive step. So you guys, for some of you that are using the billing side of things, you'll see there's a section called template billing, and think of these as recurring bills. So I'd also urge you once again to get creative. It's not only limited to statutory safekeeping billing or statutory audit billing. This could be used in other areas as well, like monthly accounting and certain things that are repetitive and reoccurring, like monthly PAYE or monthly VAT. So I've set up a template bill for all my statutory safekeeping clients because it's January 2022. I know the filter is going to say 21, but please, let's just get creative. It's January 2022, and I want to bill my clients and make sure that I'm not missing out on anything. Okay, so what we can now do is we set up these templates, and in the templates, you define the line item and the billing item, the service lines, the clients, all of that. And you also specify the amount. So I've specified an amount of 250, which I think we could really get away with if we start billing our clients for annual statutory safekeeping of keeping their statutory records safe. So you'll see there is a list of, I think, about 8. And I mean, from a partner perspective or a manager's perspective, we can quickly just preview this report. And right away, we can start forecasting, well, we're going to be billing 1,000 clients at the rate of 250. So we can now more or less see what we're going to have coming in the next month based off of this fee. So it's a very nice report. It gives a summary of who's getting billed and the description and. So that's the setup side of things. And I just want to show you how easy this is. Because much like our working papers, once it's set up, it's set up. We can just go ahead and click generate bills. And what it's actually going to do is right at the click of a button, it's going to generate our batch, push this batch to the billing screen. And in that billing screen, it will be able to go through the relevant approval processes. So if I just go over to the billing screen, and I might need to backdate this because I put it as January, but let's just see. There we go. You can see there's a batch that I just created of 8 invoices, and it literally was with a click of a button. Okay, so that's template billing. And from a statutory point of view, we can use it to make sure that we are billing our clients on an annual basis for the statutory safekeeping, or perhaps we have a agreed retainer that we're billing them monthly, and that includes our statutory services. And then we could make use of that as well. Okay, so that's a template billing and the client services side of things. I see time is catching up with me. I've got about 20 minutes or so to run through the rest of it. I'm going to go and head over to annual returns. And there's 1 or 2 things that might be familiar to you guys if you do use the annual return side of things frequently. But I just want to highlight certain areas and certain things and make sure that we all are getting the best out of GreatSoft from an annual returns perspective. Okay, so I'm going to just highlight something because I've had 1 or 2 report queries or 1 or 2 support queries rather in the last week or 2 surrounding the annual returns flag. So by default, all clients are flagged for annual return when you load them. So if we head over to just adding a new client, you'll see the very first thing, if we head over to SEC, they are by default flagged for large annual returns. Okay, so that being said, we need to make sure that all our clients are either flagged for annual returns, or we need to go ahead and unflag the ones whose annual returns we aren't busy doing or working with. So if I head over to reports, there's a very nice report that will allow us to see this. So if I go to client, you can see there's a report, clients not flagged for SEC annual returns. And if we run that report, then we'll get a nice exception listing of all of our clients that are indeed either need to be or aren't flagged for annual returns. Okay, so that's a very nice report. And if I was you guys, I'd go ahead and flag that together with the client services reports as favorites to quickly access them in the future. Okay, so let's head over straight to annual returns. But before we go ahead and do that, I just also want to highlight something more specifically to the public interest score calculator, because I've seen there's not a lot of users that use the public interest score calculator in GreatSoft because they're perhaps doing it on their working paper solution, whether that be DraftWorks or casework. But I'd urge you, whether it be the accounting manager or the accounting clerk, auditing clerk, whoever's perhaps working with annual financial statements, or even perhaps the compliance officer or the company secretarial, to go ahead and fill in these public interest scores, because they add a lot of benefit when we look at the annual returns as well as the SIPC compliance checklist. And it just reduces our administrative burden, because what it does, you'll see what I've done here is I've preemptively added a public interest score calculation for please submit my annual return. And if I open that up, you'll see I've captured all the relevant info, which gives me my score. If I just click calculate again, it's a voluntary audit and my interest score is 108. And I can also go ahead and print this report, which I could then perhaps attach to the audit file or whatever the case may be. But the real value for this, adding this in GreatSoft, comes through to the annual returns. Because if I head over to annual returns, and I can either pull up the annual returns for the year 2021 for all my entities, or I can go ahead and filter it for incorporation month of July. So there we see we have eight records for the month of July. And if we now head over to please submit my annual return, which has yet not been started, you can see the ones that have been started are half flagged. The ones that have been completed are fully flagged. If I go into please submit my AR and open up the annual return form, you'll see what's happening is it's pulling through the turnover, as well as whether or not it's a statutory audit or voluntary audit from the public interest score. Okay, which is pretty cool, I think. So that brings us onto the next section, the annual returns. And what I want to highlight here is just working through the annual return form, more specifically, making sure that we make use of these standard fees over here. So we can see here, I have set up a standard fee for my annual returns, and I'm charging my clients $850. So what this allows us to do now is, because I've set up that standard fee, I can now go ahead and link that fee to all my annual returns. And when I'm done for the annual returns of, let's say, either July or August, I can, again, with a click of a button, bill all my clients for the annual returns. And once again, it just reduces that administrative burden and it makes life a little bit easier. I'll be going through the global billing side of things in just a few seconds. So those are the fees, and I'd really advise you guys to set those up. They do make life a lot easier. And then obviously we've recently, for those of you not aware as yet, we've introduced this button over here at the top. And what it does, it looks at the entity's registration number. I've gone ahead and grabbed an entity registration number from our demo and testing site. And what it does, it actually pulls the SIPC database. So if I go ahead and click on update from SIPC, it pulls the SIPC database. And what it does, just click it again. Sorry, I think I misclicked it. So what it actually does, it goes and looks at the annual return status of that entity at SIPC. And Murphy's Law, I might be doing something wrong here on my side. Let me just try save it, and then doesn't seem to be doing anything. Let's close it and let's try again. Seems to be hanging just this bit there. You know, Murphy. Cool. Let's just give that a couple of seconds, and I'm going to reopen it and let's try again, because it doesn't seem to save. Give it a few seconds. Okay, I'm going to open it up again. Okay, I'm going to save it. Record saved, and I'm going to say update from subc. And it's going to poll the subc database, or perhaps, I don't know, perhaps they are down themselves because it doesn't seem to be giving us a response. Okay, but ultimately what would happen is it will pull through the enterprise. There we go. So it might have been a bit delayed. So what it will do is it will pull the subc database, and then it will see the status of the enterprise at subc. So we can see for this entity, they are currently in deregistration. So that is a big red flag for us, and that's something we should focus on our attention on to get that client compliant. And we can see there are no submissions found for this year, 2021. And obviously there wouldn't be any for perhaps 2 or 3 years back as well. So if the annual return had been submitted at subc, what you could do is you can come into GreatSoft, and then you could just go about and click update. So now it's no longer of a process of flagging this, adding that. You can just go ahead and click update, and it flags it as submitted, and then you can close the record. So we've really tried to streamline that process for you guys. So let's think of this in terms of a process flow. So we've now gone ahead and pulled through the enterprise status. We've now gone ahead and worked out the client's turnover, and based off that, we're going to get the annual duty amount. The very next thing that we need to do is to send out letters to our clients. So GreatSoft is quite flexible in the sense where you can either generate the letter here within the form itself for this client. If I just say save and then view letter. So this site that I'm working on has CDM integration. So what it's going to do is it's going to push it directly to the client portal. But if you didn't have CDM integration, you could just grab that Word template, change it to PDF, and then send it through to the client. So if I head over to the document section and I click on the actual letter, you'll see it contains all my client's details, together with the banking detail, obviously, of the firm, together with the fee that they need to pay to subc. And then towards the bottom on the second page, I've also added the mandate that we need to make sure that our clients fill out, more specifically to ensure that we can lodge this to subc. And that also directly ties back to Poppy. So we need to make sure that all of these things are in order. And I'll be making sure to update the default template letter on our databases as well for you guys to include the mandate. Cool. So that's the annual return side of things, the letters inside the actual form. But let's say we've perhaps done like 10 or 8 annual returns for the month, and we don't want to go through and go into each form one by one. So what we can go about doing is we need to make sure that all the records are at the very least started. So what does that mean? They have this little half star or flagged as open over here on the status side of things. And then we need to head over to global letters. So I think most of us have seen this button on our screens, but I don't think we've tried to make use of it, and it is really a great function. So if I now go ahead and say I want to generate bulk letters for all my entities, all my offices, obviously you could filter this if you have reporting to a specific partner or specific office or manager. And what I want to do is I want to filter all the records that were processed for, let's say, from last week Monday all the way through to Friday. I don't want to sort it in a specific sequence, and I want to do it for the year 2021 and then for the incorporation month of July. So now what I can do, as if you don't have CDM integration, you can just directly zip this to your computer, which, I mean, it saves a huge administrative burden. I mean, I remember the days when we had to generate those letters and create them manually. You can go ahead and zip them to your file, zip them to your local machine, grab it, and then attach it to an email to a client. Or if you have CDM, you can just go ahead and say publish directly to CDM. What I'm also going to do is, because I have previously printed these letters in preparation for the webinar, is I'm just going to say reprint letters. Cool. So if you have already done it once and you're going to do it again, perhaps you sending a second RSVP because you didn't get a great response the first time around. I'm just going to make an RSVP the 7th. Then you just go ahead and flag reprint. So now at a click of a button, I can just say yes. And what it's going to do, it's going to generate all of those letters in bulk for me. And if I now go to these respective clients' annual return forms, I'll see that the letters are there and they're already sitting in the client's folder for me. And I didn't have to do anything within each individual form itself. So I think that's quite a neat functionality from an admin's perspective and trying to reduce that burden. Okay, so now we've sent the letters through to our clients. So whether or not they pay us or whether or not they pay it into the account, we actually go ahead and submit the annual return to SIPC or BIPA for the Namibian clients. What we could now do is we could flag these all as submitted, or we could just make use of the update button in SIPC. But now we're coming towards the end of the close of the annual return process. And now we just want to go about billing these clients. So now we have another very obscure menu item that I think not a lot of us go to is global billing sec. And over here, there's once again a few preset filters that we need to define. So I'm going to be billing for Office A. I'm going to be billing for the year 2021. I'm going to be billing for the incorporation month, July. And it's going to be for all my records. And just to speak the same language as my letters, I'm going to say for all the records that are processed from the 14th up until Friday. And it's going to Office A. It's for the service line secretarial because we want to see that money coming into the secretarial department. And it could be a fee, so that means it goes against WIP. But for today's demonstration purposes, I'm just going to leave it as a normal standard invoice, so it has no effect on WIP. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to say flag annual returns. One thing that we do need to be aware of, to make use of global billings, we need to set up our master forms, and our support team, together with consultants, will be able to assist you if you do need help with doing so. That could also be found under maintenance master forms. But once again, it's one of those things. Once it's set up forever, and you don't need to go about doing it again. So I'm going to be flagging annual returns, and my batch number is going to be webinar. And the invoice date, yeah, let's make it today. And I'm GreatSoft supervisor, so I'm going to be the one requesting the bill. Cool. So what we could do now is we could go ahead and generate a preview of this report before actually running it. And once again, we could provide this preview report. I think I might need to continue first and then preview. So we can provide this. There were no rows processed for the filters. Perhaps I'm missing something. Sorry. I'm just going to change this to all. And let's go ahead and continue. Huh, that's strange. Okay, I might be missing something or one of the presets. I did run through this yesterday and it did work. I do apologize. I'm just going to change this to 2021 and try one more time. My start date is July. Sorry, guys. There we go. So this date was before that date, and I think that's where it was falling over. So let's go ahead and try again. So I'm going to say continue. Generate the bills, yes. And now it's moaning about the office, I think. Sorry, there's one or two things that we need to be certain of. There we go. Third time lucky, as they say. Hey? So there we've successfully created the batch webinar. And what we can do now is we can generate this report. Let's try run it. There we go. Let's try run it again. But this report will give us a nice summary of what's actually happening and what we've generated. And otherwise, we could always just make use of the actual billings reports on the billing screens, because you'll see what that's done now is wherever I've linked that standard fee to my client's annual return form, it's gone and generated the actual invoices together with the agreed upon fee that I charge for my clients, which is $850, as well as the annual duty or annual return amount as well. So there we can see the annual return figure of 3,000 Rand for please submit my annual returns, and it's 0 VATed, and there's my firm fee of $850. So once again, you guys can see with a click of a button, we can generate those bills in bulk and ultimately reduce a huge admin burden for us quite easily. So that really, I know I did quickly run through it quite quickly, but I just wanted us to be aware of these things because I feel there's a lot of secretarial clients that aren't aware of template billing or aren't aware of global billing, and they weren't aware of the annual returns functions with SIP-C, or perhaps not even the registers function with SIP-C. And I wanted to highlight those areas because ultimately they can assist us together with other utilities such as our workflows that generate your consent forms, your resolution forms, all of those legal requirements that can assist us in starting the discussions with our clients, implementing the processes, and then also upskilling our employees. I'm just quickly going to head over to the Q&A side of things. I see Ian does look like he has answered some of the questions. Yes. There we go. And I think there's one or two of you in the chat, I'm thinking. Oh, I see you. Most of you are in the chat. There we go. And I just want to quickly squiz through this. Sound gone. Still no sound. Good for everyone. Because SIP-C provides two fields insert address. Thanks, Jason. Sorry, I'm just quickly going to run through these and make sure I didn't miss anything. Is it possible to ignore the layout provides? I'm just gonna, is it possible to ignore layout of compare to SIP-C, because SIP-C provides 2 to 3 fields to insert an address and GreatSoft offers, I think, 7. So how the address is captured will always pull disputes. We always state CC, P2I, and GreatSoft, and SIP-C always leaves the name out on the company. Will it be possible to ignore these minor differences in the new SIP-C compare? Thanks, Jason. We'll definitely look in that. Sue, I have sound. Sound is fine. Hi, Nico. Nope. No, I have sound. Hi, Jason. Yes, I can. There's the cool. Thanks, Ian. Awesome. That's good. Good to know. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna quickly just run through these. Looks like looks like Ian has addressed most of them. If there is anything that I haven't got to, thanks, Ian. What a great guy. Then you could go about and just send me through an email. I'm going to be sharing my email address with you guys now. Just get back to formalities, as they say. So I think Ian addressed most of the questions in the session. And I just want to thank everyone. This was my first webinar. It was a little bit stressful. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules and joining. I really do appreciate it. And I want to urge you guys to keep well and keep safe in these difficult times that we find ourselves with COVID. And upon exiting the webinar, please do go and fill out the survey. And also, please feel free to email me should you wish just to have a chat over a virtual cup of coffee, or have any suggestions or any feedback. You can reach me on sheldon.mahew@greatsoft.co.za. Just want to make sure there's no more unanswered questions. And yes, thanks everyone. I really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.